Hello everyone and welcome on back. Today I have got a no proc update for the Reflect build for you guys, and there's been a lot of changes in this new patch in the champion tree and just how PvP feels in general. And I will be perfectly honest, this might be the best way to play Stamina Templar in the game right now. It is so good, not only for the amount of damage that it can put out, but because the high hit point pool that we have makes us incredibly resistant to incoming burst. We have rebuilt this guy to have a whopping 48k hit points, as well as 8k weapon damage in medium armor. So this build does a really good job, not only being durable with its huge damage shields, but it can put out a lot of pressure, and its healing power is quite impressive as well. I have really been enjoying playing this guy since the new CP update has hit. I'm not gonna lie, in the no proc meta, this feels like one of the strongest builds that you can play out here. It's just good against pretty much everything, and if we come by a target that, let's say, is too tanky for us to kill, we could always throw Onslaught on and cut through them like butter. So I would highly recommend you guys try the build, and honestly, it is so great to see Blazing Shield actually make a bit of a comeback. All right, let's take a look at that build. So to start off, I am an Orc on this guy. We are stacking health and weapon damage, and Orc does that the best out of everybody. That being said, Imperial is also a really good option because of the cost reduction they get across the board and the big max health and stam pools that they get. Wood Elf is also not a bad option because you get a lot of stamina recovery, and then of course Dark Elf isn't a bad choice either because it'll give you both max stat pools. This build stacks health, so we don't have the biggest magicka and stamina pools, and that's actually why Dark Elf isn't a terrible option. It gives the weapon damage on top as well. That being said, you could play this build on any race that you want. Now, taking a look at our stats, when we look at our hit points here, 48.1k health. We've got just shy of 14k magicka and 16k stam, buffing it up to about 18k stam on the front bar. So we've got a lot of hit points on this build and very small other pools. Now, the first thing that people worry about with a small stamina pool, especially this being our main resource, is that we're going to run out of resources quickly while we play this build. This build has really good sustain, and on top of it, there is a little bit of something in our CP passives that make us very, very good at rolling on this build for a cheap cost. So we can actually get away with this small stamina pool. Something I do want to mention that's really huge about the new champion system and this patch in general is that your base minimum stats for max magicka, health, and stamina are all going to be a little bit higher, especially your off pools. This does wonders for a build like this when we want to invest into something like health and not invest into our primary damage pool. So a really good change that I think makes this particular build a lot more viable than it was the previous patch. Now let's take a look at the sustains on this build. I'm going to buff up with our potion and the rally to see what we've got. We got 1,449 magicka recovery, 1,200 health recovery, and 2.5k stamina recovery on our back bar, and it goes down to 2.3k on the front bar. We've got a lot more sustain than we did last patch on this spec, which is super awesome. This additional sustain allowed us to really drop the resto staff as well, and these high sustain numbers go really well with our lower pools. That'll help us keep our resources high. Now, taking a look at our weapon damage, this is probably our best stat on the build. We've got a whopping 6.8k weapon damage with the rally up. When we proc the minor brutality from our poison, as well as the infused weapon spell damage glyph on our bow, we hit over 8k weapon damage on this build. We got 36% crit chance and very little penetration. That really high base weapon damage is super important, not only for our outgoing damage, but our healing as well. This build's healing power is significantly better than it was in the previous patch. A lot of that has to do with the changes of the champion system as well, but it is also because we're stacking a lot more weapon damage. Now, our crit rate isn't super high, and it honestly doesn't really have to be. You could actually run the Leviathan set on this instead of Hunding's Rage, which we have on, if you wanted to have a higher crit rate. Critical damage in PvP and critical healing is actually very good. Damage especially is a lot better than it used to be, so this is a stat that is worth investing to now. And then the penetration, very low, 1,400 penetration, and that is pretty much just from our base CP. And then on top of it, we have Power of the Light, so we can get up to 4,400 penetration in total. It's not very high, but we do have a great sword on, so you could always use Onslaught as your ultimate. 8k weapon damage plus penetrating all of your opponent's armor makes it a very good option to kill opponents' tanky builds. But I'll be honest, our weapon damage is so darn high, Plus, the damage in general in this patch is so high that we really don't need to have a lot of penetration. We can kill even tankier targets without having to use Onslaught on this build. So yeah, you don't need to worry too much about the low penetration. If you wanted to increase the damage of this build in general, you could build penetration instead of weapon damage. However, you lose the healing that this build has. And honestly, I think it's better to go this way and have the option for Onslaught while still maintaining that very powerful healing. Now, let's take a look at our resists on this build. When we're standing in our rune, we have got 2,400 spell resist and just shy of 2,100 physical resist with 1,980 crit resist. And when we walk outside of the rune, you can see those go a little bit lower in the spell and physical resist departments. These are not bad. I mean, we're a medium armor build. We're 5 medium, 1 heavy, 1 light. We're not going to have super high resist because we haven't invested anything into it outside of just running our armor buff. The crit resist is very important this patch. Critical damage is doing a lot in PvP, and that has a lot to do with the fact that you can't stack crit resist as easily as you could before. Now you don't get it passively in your CP as easily. On top of it, you actually have to slot a star to get more crit resist from your CP. So we've gone that route to hit the 2k crit resist value. This isn't really high, but this isn't too terribly bad either. This build's durability really comes from the high healing power mixed with the very high health pool and the big damage shields on top. We can just heal away and soak up damage a lot better than someone with half our hit points would be able to. Now let's take a look at the Mundus we're running. We have got the Serpent on this bad boy. Very important for that stamina recovery. If you don't have Orc as your race, if you go Wood Elf, for example, you can put the Warrior here instead. Really, you just want to make sure that you have that 2,500 stamina recovery on your back bar or so. So that's why we got the Serpent here. And then for the food, we have got the Orzorga Smoked Bear Haunch. And then finally, we are also a werewolf. This is important for the stamina recovery bonus that we get for just slotting the ultimate on our back bar. You don't necessarily need to be a werewolf on this build. You could even go vampire and use the vampire ult because it'll make your health pool super huge, but it's totally up to the user. I like werewolf because it gives us a little bit more sustain. Our healing power, again, is much better this patch than it used to be. We can heal away very effectively on this build, so we don't need to run the Resto Staff healing ult or even the Templar healing ult on the back bar. So you have a lot of freedom with what you want to do there. Now, taking a look at the food, we have got the Bear Haunch, and this is the way to go for this build. And I'll talk about why you want to use the Smoked Bear Haunch. First of all, it gives us max health, and then our stamina, magicka, and health recoveries. All of these recoveries are awesome because we need the sustain in order for this build to work. The health recovery being a very good passive healing over time stat for PvP. And then, of course, max health, we are stacking health, so that's great. But the big reason that I'm using the Bear Haunch here instead of going for a food that gives us max stamina or something is because we want to stack weapon damage as high as possible. There is no food in the game that gives you weapon damage, so if we get our regen from our food source, we can effectively stack the weapon damage in all the other sources that we have on the build. So yeah, from a min-max standpoint, especially because we're limited to so few sets in PvP, this is the way to go. If you were to play this build in no CP, there are some changes you're going to want to make to it, but you're still going to run the Orzorga Smoked Bear Haunch. Now, the potion that we have on this build is, of course, the Tri Potion, giving us all of our recoveries and a whole bunch of resources back everywhere too. 30% increased recovery to all our stats is super important for our sustain. This is definitely a must-have in order for this build to function properly. So now let's take a look at the gear we're running on this build. And yeah, we are limited to those 20 or so sets that ZeniMax has posted for us. So this is the no proc gear. Of course, if you guys want to play this in IC or in BGs, you might want to make a few changes to the gear. But let's jump right into it. Let's start off with the Hunding's Rage set. This is going to give us the weapon crit, the max stam weapon crit, and then 300 weapon damage. Hunding's Rage was my choice for a couple reasons. Number one, we're not stacking penetration, and we wanted to stack as much weapon damage as possible. Hunding's Rage is going to be one of the best weapon damage set options right now. And then the second thing was the weapon crit. Critical damage, like I said, is a lot better than it used to be right now, and on top of it, it's a huge deal for our healing. And then the next set we have is Plague Doctor. This is only on our back bar, and this is pretty much our max health set. I like having this on the back bar because of the limited sets that we're using. You don't have really proc sets that you can put on your back bar to give you a damage bonus on the front one. So back barring the hit points for those damage shields is a really good option. And then, of course, on the front bar, we swap to 3 pieces of agility. This is going to give us max stam and a big amount of weapon damage as well. Just a really good option to give us that defensive-offensive swap. And then finally, we have a single piece of the trainee gear on for a little bit more max health. Now, if you wanted, you could actually run a monster helm one piece here instead of the trainee, but I'll be honest, the max health is the superior stat. Having high hit points on this build is a must for it to function properly. Now, let's take a look at the traits on the gear. We're going to start off with the bow. The bow is infused with the weapon spell damage enchant. This is super important so that we can maintain that really high weapon damage value when we set our combo with the light attack into Power of the Light. When we swap to the greatsword, we have got Nirnhoned, and we actually have a brutality draining poison on here. Now, this poison is a tricky poison to make because it actually requires 3 ingredients. You make it from a dragonthorn, blessed thistle, and fleshfly larva. And this is a really nice poison for the fact that it gives us that minor brutality, and it'll even debuff our opponent, reducing the damage that they deal. So in a one-on-one can be a very good poison too. The minor brutality though is great not only for our outgoing damage, but our outgoing healing as well. And then something I want to note is that we have a greatsword versus the maul on the front bar here. You could go for the maul for the additional penetration, but again, we are stacking weapon damage, and greatswords are going to give you a base 256 bonus weapon damage this patch. So that's a part of how we're hitting that 8k value here. Now, taking a look at the jewelry, we have full infused with the weapon damage enchants. Again, very important that we have these infused weapon damage here and get our sustain from our food instead of having regen glyphs here. And then for the gear, I have a mix of invigorating, infused, and 1 piece of well-fitted. The infused pieces are on our large pieces of armor to give us that huge maximum health bonus. You can see all our enchants are also max health on this too. And then the invigorating for that additional sustain, still max health enchants. And then the 1 piece well-fitted, honestly, you could go invigorating here. It doesn't really matter. Our roll cost is already very cheap thanks to our champion points. If you want to play this build in no CP, you're going to have issues in the sustain and max pool department more than anything. So a good option actually is to just switch out the 5 Hunding's Rage for 5 pieces of Shacklebreaker. Keep in mind this is a no proc build, so we are limited to using certain sets. So if you do want to play this in no CP, a full rebuild might also be warranted for it, as we don't have those set restrictions. And finally, we are running 5 pieces of medium, 1 heavy, and 1 light. This is to give us the maximum health bonus that we can get from our Undaunted passives. So now let's take a look at the skills we're running on this bad boy. Starting off on our front bar, we have Biting Jabs. I'm just going to buff up with the rally so you guys can see that pretty vicious Jabs tooltip. 3.8k times 4, and then of course it can proc Burning Light. This will also snare your opponent when you hit them with it. Really, really strong. And last but not least, we gain Major Savagery when we use Jabs. This is kind of important if we don't want to use Camo Hunter and use a different skill. We can get that Major Savagery buff from Jabs. This is your primary spammable though. In this patch, damage is very high. Jabs cuts through people like butter. It does so much damage, and on top of it, if you're fighting anyone in light armor, they will not be able to sit next to you if you're jabbing them. This build hits pretty hard, so we can definitely put some hurt into people with these. The next ability we have is Toppling Charge. This is our primary stun and gap closer, and that's pretty much it. We're just using it for those purposes. It does set our opponent off balance, but we don't have stun's favor on, so it isn't super important that it does that. It is nice though if an opponent does block your initial gap close and they don't get stunned, you can hit them with a partial charged heavy to stun them afterwards. The next skill we have is Camouflaged Hunter. This is here for the passives that it provides for the most part. We get the Major Savagery buff, which is great for our damage and healing. Minor Berserk when we hit an opponent from the flank, which will increase our damage done by 5%. And then finally, it is also 3% additional weapon damage on our front bar, being a Fighter's Guild skill. We can use this Stealth Detect too, but it's very expensive, and you're probably better off just spamming jabs around as it costs half as much as Camo Hunter to use. The next skill we have is Forward Momentum, and this is one of our most important buff skills and utility combat skills for the build. We get Major Brutality and we get Minor Endurance, both really important for our sustain and damage. And then on top of it, we get 4 seconds of snare immunity, and it will remove all the snares that we have on us. This is super important to help keep us mobile. We have the bow roll dodge in order to give us that Major Expedition, and this will make sure that we can fully utilize our movement speed bonuses. The next skill that we have is Resolving Vigor. This is our primary heal for the build. I'm going to buff up so you guys can see the tooltip on Resolving Vigor. 2,600 health over 4 seconds. This is a massive heal for us, and yeah, it is a huge part of why we are so durable on this build. Our damage shields are about as strong as they were last patch, but our healing is almost twice as good. Big difference in survivability. And then finally for the ultimate, we have got Dawnbreaker of Smiting. And Dawnbreaker of Smiting is my ultimate of choice just from having played this build for a while. You could go for Onslaught here for that armor penetration, and then you've got 8k weapon damage and full penetration on top. However, I really like Dawny for the AoE stun that it provides and that big dot afterwards. Even though we don't have a ton of penetration, this will still hit people super hard, and you guys will see in the footage, we can get over 14k Dawny crits on players, so massive amounts of damage from that guy. Now, taking a look at our back bar, the first ability we have is Power of the Light. This is our primary combo starter for the build. It will apply Minor Breach to the target, which will reduce their physical and spell resist, which is super nice not only for our damage outgoing, but it'll also make our reflected shields deal a little bit more damage too. Power of the Light's a pretty simple skill. You put the effect on them, it deals a little bit of physical damage, and then it stores the damage they take, releasing 20% of it as physical damage to them after 6 seconds. The maximum copy damage of this is only 10k, and this scales off of our stamina pool. So if our stamina pool is very small, the maximum copy damage has a much smaller value. That being said, this is still a really good burst skill. Even though it's only 10k here, having that on top of all our other attacks is what's important. Now, the next ability we have is Spiked Bone Shield. This is our stamina shield, and this is probably the shield you will be casting the most. You will be casting a lot of Blazing Shield as well, but occasionally you'll want to purge pretty often, so you want to make sure you keep at least your Spiked Bone Shield up all the time if you can help it. It'll give us an 8.5k damage shield in PvP and return 100% of the direct damage absorbed back to its enemy if they are within melee range. Really nice stuff, because this is a big part of where this build's damage can come from. Not only do we have good outgoing damage, but we can reflect a good portion of our opponent's damage back to themselves, giving us that higher kill potential than we would have without it. And not just that, but combining this damage shield with our Vigor and our other damage shield makes us incredibly durable. Now, the next ability we have is the Blazing Shield, and this is going to be our Magicka costing shield. Just like the Bone Shield, we can use it to return damage back to our attackers, except this time it will explode as an AoE around us. Blazing Shield is probably not going to do quite as much damage as Bone Shield to your targets, but still a pretty hefty amount of burst on top of what we're doing. Not to mention, it's a Adric Spear skill, so we can get those Burning Light procs a little bit sooner if the Blazing Shield explodes. And then finally, we have Extended Ritual. This is a very important skill for this build for a few reasons. Number one, that Purify that removes 5 harmful negative effects. Super important in PvP that a Templar uses their Purify. It is very good, and it hard counters a ton of different skills in the game, including damage over time attacks and things like a Sorcerer's Curse. And number two, the healing over time portion of it. It isn't a super powerful heal, don't get me wrong, but it lasts a really long time, and it's 3k health every 2 seconds, so it's just a little bit less than half of Vigor. And this build is durable enough that we can do a really good job camping the healing from Extended Ritual. And then finally, our last normal ability is Restoring Focus. This will give us a little bit of additional stamina every 1 second when we use it. And then on top of it, we get our physical spell resistance buffs when we use it as well. If you stand in this rune, you get a little bit of a bonus to your resists too. And then for the ultimate, we have got the Werewolf Berserker. You don't have to be a werewolf for this build. I like it a lot because of the additional stamina recovery. That being said, you have flexibility on your back bar with what ultimate you want to use. You are not locked into being a werewolf. And I think the fun part about this build too is that if you want to use your werewolf ultimate, this is going to be quite a strong wolf on top of the base build itself. So yeah, it is an option too. Now let's take a look at the champion points on this build. We're going to start off in our Warfare, the blue tree. Taking a look at the slotted stars that we have Biting Aura as our first one for 10% additional AoE damage. All of our attacks are AoE unless we use Executioner. So yeah, really good for our damage. Resilience is the next one that I've slotted, and this one is a very good star to slot right now because critical damage is a lot stronger than it used to be. So yeah, I definitely wanted to slot this here, even instead of another offensive option. And then we've got Fighting Finesse for the 10% critical damage and critical healing bonus. This is really nice offensively and defensively. And then the last one we have is Untamed Aggression. Now, Untamed Aggression is kind of the flex spot. I liked the base weapon and spell damage because it's good for our outgoing damage and our outgoing healing. You could, however, put Backstabber here instead, and that would give you a 15% damage bonus to an opponent that you're flanking. We're also going to be trying to flank targets on this build when we stun them because of our Camouflaged Hunter. So Backstabber is a natural pairing with Camouflaged Hunter. That being said, our crit rate isn't super high, so if you want to have the highest maximum burst possible, Backstabber's the way to go. If you want to have the better balanced build, stick with Untamed Aggression. Now, our passive points that we put in this tree are mostly focused on healing power and things like increasing our magicka and stamina pools. Our max pools are very small, so I would highly recommend filling out these ones first, following it up with the critical chance, and then going the healing power route. And then, of course, building into penetration and stuff as you get more champion points. Now, taking a look at the fitness tree, this is a very, very important tree for this build. And that's a big reason why I say if you want to play this in no CP, you definitely want to have a bit more recovery than we do in the CP version. So starting off with our first star here, we have Boundless Vitality giving us more additional health. Very important because we are stacking health for those shields. Rejuvenation for all 3 recoveries, also super important for the build. And then we've got Arcane Alacrity. While under the effects of a damage shield, your roll dodge costs 160 less per stage. So an 800 total roll cost reduction. Mix that with Tumbling to give us 1,160 roll cost reduction with a damage shield up. That is a massive deal. It's a big reason why we can get away with the smaller stamina pool on this build, and it is honestly a big reason why this build feels so much more viable than it used to. Templar is very unique in the fact that it gets to play that shield stacking medium armor build, so this is pretty cool for Templar here. Now, the next thing we've got is Bastion, and this is the last slotted star that we have. And this is here to give us a 15% increase in effectiveness of our damage shields, as well as 15% increased damage done to our opponent's shields. We are a medium armor build that uses physical damage. If we fight a light armor build, we already innately have a martial damage bonus against them. If there's something like a Sork that's using damage shields, we all of a sudden have a massive damage increase against them. So this goes a really long way to helping us kill those light armor targets, especially things like sorcerers. And then finally, for your passive stars here, your really important ones are going to be Tumbling. Of course, roll dodge is super important. Reducing the cost of break free is always a good way to go. Making sure you get this hasty passive for the movement speed while you sprint is very important too. And then of course, Hero's Vigor for that max health. Gotta have your hit points. And then finally, when we take a look at that green tree, the only important things that are worth mentioning here are the Steed's Blessing for a little bit more movement speed out of combat. You're not always in combat in Cyrodiil, so this comes in handy just for positioning. And then finally, the Break Fall for 35% reduced fall damage. Alright guys, we are going to jump into that PvP commentary. I've got quite a few clips for you guys on this spec, so buckle in and enjoy. We're going to start off with a little bit of a skirmish outside of Sejanus. Right away you see we pottle that Sork, toppling charge into her, and it's a jab and a half and she's dead. Just showing off how much damage we can deal to something like a squishy light armor target. So I just head back to the rocks here, make sure to reset my buffs, and I'm keeping at least 1 damage shield up so that we don't get spiked super hard by anything. And we right away pottle up this Templar, go for the Dawnbreaker after she stuns us, and then follow that into the jabs. We drop her hit points super low there, but she manages to make the heal in time. So I just go for another pottle and start jabbing her, and then more yellow players come around the corner. So I just go for a little bit of movement here, showing off that medium armor movement that we have on this beastly health build. And we managed to get a little bit of a split, just LOSing the one yellow player there, toppling back into the Templar and finish her off. She did not heal herself there. And I'm just going to head back behind the safety of these rocks here and reset my buffs. I really, really like having the bow on the back bar for this build because we can use heavy attacks to return stamina. And we didn't have that option with the Resto staff that we previously had in the old version. This poor Nightblade, man, he cannot sit there. He tries to channel the snipe in our face. Dawnbreaker jabs, he is dead. And then we just reset our shields, and I go for a heavy attack into jabs, try to get the toppling charge on that player, and he actually ends up, I think, blocking the attack. I don't think he had CC immunity there, and we just reset our shields here again. I throw the Power of the Light down on this enemy player here, jump into him. She's got 16k hit points, and that was a bad call on my part. We didn't have the stamina to go and make that move. We definitely should have been careful and tried to get a heavy attack or two off on the rocks. That being said, we're going to take the death and try again. Moving on to our next clip here, I actually have a little bit of a 2vx with this build. You can play this guy solo and it's good, but I'll be honest, it is really, really good in a group, because if opponents have to choose whether to target you or not, they tend not to target you, and then on top of it, we've got a lot of damage, so we can just run up and hurt people, and they tend to ignore us until we put that hurt into them. So here you can see we have a friendly Stamsword jumping on top of the guy we just pottled. He goes for his crystal weapon combo. I quickly turn and we're going to stun the guy that jumps on the Stamsword. I get great damage with the Donnie into the jabs there, and you can see the Stamsword just sticks out the kill with the Executioner there, and he drags in a meteor. I didn't see that. We're just going to break it and then go back into our blazing shield here. I hit this guy with the toppling charge, getting the stun off, and then right away feeding him jabs. His health dropping super low there, and the Stamsword getting the finish with the Executioner there. I'm just going to get back behind the tree and reset again. The Sork goes for the Dawnbreaker on that opposing Mag Sork, and I'm going to go for the toppling charge and just start jabbing him. Unfortunately, I was really slow on that attempt there. He already had all his shields up and everything. And we take a bit of pressure, so I just kite back behind the rocks. I don't have a ton of resource here, so I'm just going to try to get that purge off and then see if we can get some greatsword heavy attacks. This guy just walks right into us. I hit him with the toppling charge into the Dawnbreaker, and again, we catch a player just not expecting us to be able to hit that hard, and he didn't have his damage shield up either, so we just dropped him very quickly with that. And now we're just going to start puddling up the next target here. The Sork streaks gets a good stun on this guy. I start feeding him the jabs. The Sork's going for the Executioners. I puddle up the next target. The Sork finishes him off. We're going to purge off all those dots, purge off the curse as well. Actually, the curse ended up staying on. Too many dots on us, but that's okay. The second purge, and we're going to go for a couple toppling charges to prevent these guys from getting the res. I actually think that enemy player there did get the res off, but I'm just making sure to keep pottles down on players here, and always making sure to keep my healing circle down so we have a safe place to retreat to. I get the Dawnbreaker into jabs. Unfortunately, that was pretty poor timing, as the enemy group was ready for that, and they threw some shields and heals down on him right away. So we're just going to have to reset back behind the rocks here. The friendly Sork here went off to the left to fight the enemy Sork. I jump on top of this guy and start feeding him jabs. The enemy group starts throwing a bit of pressure on me, and I just go for the shield stack. Then we're going to switch to the target that our friendly player is going for here. We finish him off. Our jabs actually doing quite a bit of damage through that guy to the next player, so I just keep jabbing this enemy Sork. And you can see these poor light armor builds, man. He's literally just shield stacking and trying to run away from us. He starts going for his offensive combo here. I hit him with the toppling charge, and he streaks right before the charge hits us, so he actually gets the counter stun there. And I'm just going to go for a little bit of a shield stack, and there you see as we jump in the air, a nice bow heavy attack. The resource pools on this build are very small, so if you can get those heavy attacks off, they come in very handy. There you see a nasty slapdown from that Dawnbreaker into the jabs. The friendly Stamsword coming in to help us get that kill. And we pottle up this enemy Sork here. I jump on top of him with the gap closer. Again, unfortunately getting stunned at the end of that gap closer. And we aren't able to capitalize on some damage on him. And the friendly Sork here, he pushes into the rest of the yellow. They've kind of retreated. I have just one Nightblade left on me here. And there's a bunch of red players just standing around watching our fight. The Nightblade jumps right into our shield burst, and we just feed him the jabs, and he goes down. Really good damage display, I think, in that clip there. Now, moving on to the next one here, we have got a little bit of a resource scramble. This is a friendly resource. I jump on top of these guys, and I notice yellow players coming from pretty much every angle here. This guy's even coming out of the inside. I go for that quick hop to get inside as he stuns me, and we just make it in here. Something I want to point out about what just happened there is that is the major downside to our small resource pools, is that we cannot cover a lot of distance if we have a lot of players attacking us, and we need to make sure that we're dodging and keeping our guard up the whole time. That being said, we managed to make it inside. The enemy Templar follows us up. We hit him with that stun. The pottle's on him, and just one jab poke to bring him down. He only had about 20k hit points, so we are going to cut through anything that has 20k hit points very, very quickly. I'll be honest, in today's PvP, because damage is so high, I would recommend 30k HP on pretty much every build. The enemy players start coming in now. I throw the pottle down on this guy. He actually opens up with the Soul Assault, so I'm just going to shield stack his Soul Assault and just go into the jabs on top of him. The enemy player, unfortunately there, going for the healing ult. As soon as it's over, I throw the Onslaught down on him there. In this clip, I'm actually running Onslaught and Executioner, so you can use these skills if you want. I do prefer the jabs Dawnbreaker, though. I think it's a little bit better of a combo. That being said, though, we're fighting these guys in the tower here. I go for a bit of a kite, using that medium armor movement. We're going to try to get a couple heavy attacks off here into the gap closer on toppling. Toppling can be a little finicky. You saw there's a bit of lag on that gap close, so we just kite back up the staircase here, and we drop down below. And I just reset my damage shields, and we're going to see who followed us. Very deceptive, our small resource pools, I'm not going to lie. We kind of have really high sustain, so it can seem like we're out of juice when we're really not. And there you see, this guy comes around the corner, 2 jabs, and he goes down right away. The next player comes down, it's a Nightblade. We hit him with the toppling charge, start feeding him the jabs, and he rolls off the edge to finish himself off with that dot damage. And now the last opponent comes around the corner. He has 40k hit points. We put the pottle on him. We feed him 2 sets of jabs. He's at 15k HP now. And this man needs a heal. That's all I can say. He definitely needed to have something to heal himself, so we just finish him off with the execute. Now moving on to our next clip here. This was one of the first fights that I got into on this build. It was also an earlier version of this build that, I'll be honest, wasn't quite as good as the one that I'm sharing with you guys. That being said, we jump on top of these blue players here, and I try to finish off the guy on his horse, but they respond right away with lots of pressure on me. I want to go for that heavy attack into the onslaught. I was denied by the stun there. There you see, we finally get the heavy attack, and then we hit the onslaught after just to finish off the player that refused to heal himself there. And these guys are keeping up a lot of pressure. We're definitely going to do our best to kite around the pillar here and put the jabs down where we can. Try to go for the executioner. It was a little bit premature there. And this guy's going to attempt the res. We hit the bash on him, and there you saw in the background, a yellow Nightblade actually just ganked one of the blue players there. So we jump on top of this guy going for the res again. It's only 3 blue players left on top of us here. They go for the streak through, but now we got our potion up. A lot of resource in our pools to work with, and we're going to try to keep the pressure down. We hit this guy with the jabs, the second toppling charge coming through, and the executioner through all the guards there. Didn't get hit by the guards, which is good because they can be rough with the body block. And then we just combo out the last player as he attempts to res with the Nightblade there. And really short and sweet, but again, nice damage on the build. And right away in this next clip, we just shred through that Necro. There was a 4k crit on our jabs there. That's pretty high, I'm not going to lie. And we jump on top of this guy here. He eats the first set of jabs. A Nightblade jumps on top of us, and we feed him the Dawnbreaker into jabs. And you can see just how quickly, with our shield explosion and the Dawny, we can make a Nightblade pay for trying to jump on top of us like that. And the enemy players here are going to see just from the keep. Having that big health pool is a huge help when you're dealing with incoming siege as well, simply because when you get hit by it, it's not going to take as big a chunk of your health out because you have so much more. Now, I know this clip isn't the solo stuff that I normally try to do. This is a little bit more of Zerg combat, but I really wanted to include a clip where we do a bit of Zerg combat so you guys can see how this build looks if you're fighting in more of a group setting. We're not grouped up with the other EP here, but I'll be honest, the durability we have just allows us to work around where EP is fighting, and we can keep ourselves fairly safe if we attract too much attention just by being having a lot of hit points. So here you can see the yellow group comes charging through, and I just decide to go right back through them. If you have a big group charging into you, the safest place to go is actually directly through them. If you force them all to turn around, it makes it harder for them to target you, and usually if you're in a group fight, they won't turn around to target you, making that an even safer place to go. And here you can see we just managed to get the last damage in for the kill on that yellow player, but mostly just kind of moving around the fight here and seeing if we can find a good target to pick off. It's always tricky in today's meta because there's a lot of healing power going around, so if you have a good combo, you can smack someone out, but if your combo is not nice and clean, it's very hard to kill people because they'll respond to it quickly. The enemy player goes for his big ultimate there. The rest of the yellow come around the corner. Again, I go for the jab on them, and they all kind of turn and converge on me. There you see that big hit point pool coming in very handy. We right away jump into the vigor and the damage shields, and we make ourselves an unattractive target as they begin to target the rest of the EP. Yeah, one of the big advantages of this build, like I said earlier, is that you have a lot of HP and people will not target you as often as they will target someone who they deem a little bit easier to kill. So here you can see not a lot of yellow players paying attention to us. We catch this guy with a stun from behind and then just feed her a couple jabs. Don't even need the pottle and she goes down. The enemy yellow players jump on top of me here and we just roll right through them after we get stunned, get back behind the tower here. And this is a particularly awesome spot for a build like this because we don't have to run very far to get to safe terrain. And I'm going to open up on this enemy Dragon Knight. We set the pottle down on him, get him with the Dawnbreaker, and then start feeding him jabs. This guy's got some durability, so like I said, we're definitely going to need a clean combo to finish him off. So I just decide that this isn't the place to try to find that clean combo, and I attack another player. He seems friendly though, so we just reset our shields and stuff here. And a big reason why we can just run around like this is because we always have those damage shields up. If we let our hit point bar show a little bit too much, people will turn and target us. So keeping those damage shields up, very important. The enemy players decide I'm not worth their time. They run off, and I go to the back end of the yellow group, and we're just going to hit a squishy and take them down right away again. And then reset our heals as we sprint back to safety here, and yellow is paying a little bit more attention to us there. There's a blue player that goes in too, but it seems like there are not a lot of red players here. We throw the pottle down on this guy. Oh, that was the, never mind, friendly Templar from earlier. This enemy Nightblade, we set the pottle down, hit him with the Dawnbreaker into the jabs, and we get him with that nasty combo. He does not have the durability to survive it. And then I jump right on top of this enemy Sork, right into his minefield. Honestly, doesn't even matter. We have so many hit points. We take a nasty amount of damage, though, for trying that combo. And you can see we go for the roll back, but I don't have my damage shield up as we're rolling. We could have saved a lot more stamina there if we had made sure to keep that damage shield up. And that's something I really want to stress about this build that I didn't pay as much attention to until I was playing a lot more of it this patch. So there you go, guys. That is the build. I hope that you guys liked it. I hope you enjoyed the footage. I'll be honest, this was a really fun build to play, and it was way better than I thought it would be in this new patch. We do the top 5 PvP battles, so if you guys want to send in your own clips for the top 5, or if you want to send in a build video to be featured on the channel, you can send that to KristoferESO@hotmail.com. You can check me out on Twitch if you guys want to catch that live gameplay. I'm working on a Nightblade build next for you guys, and of course, give me a follow on Twitter if you guys want to keep up to date with what's going on. And check out my website, KristoferESO.com, written guides to all of my builds, including this one, and a hub for all my ESO content. We are sponsored by What the Fast. They're a VPN for gamers. They can give you better ping to your favorite games, and they're free to try for the first month. Link down below for you guys. And then last but certainly not least, a massive thank you and shout out to all of my patrons on Patreon. Without you guys, I couldn't do this job, so thank you so much for supporting. Thank you everybody so much just for tuning in today. As always, I hope that you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.